So CBS just killed a 60-minute story that exposed Trump sending innocent people to a torture prison in El Salvador. They spiked it 2 hours before it was supposed to air. The reporter found out mid-flight. And the reason that they gave? The White House didn't want to comment. Let me be crystal clear about what just happened here. CBS, the network that built its reputation on hard-hitting investigative journalism, just handed Donald Trump a kill switch for any story he doesn't like. All the regime has to do is refuse to comment, and now CBS won't run it. Instead of journalism, that's state-run propaganda with a corporate logo slapped on it. And before you think this is some isolated incident, some one-off editorial fuck-up, let me walk you through exactly how we got here. Because this didn't happen by accident. This was the plan all along. Here's what they tried to bury: a preview that CBS posted and then deleted. Watch this and then ask yourself why Trump and his cronies were so fucking desperate to keep you from seeing it.
It began as soon as the planes landed. The deportees thought they were headed from the U.S. back to Venezuela, but instead they were shackled, paraded in front of cameras, and delivered to CCOT, the notorious maximum security prison in El Salvador, where they told 60 Minutes they endured 4 months of hell.
Did you think you were going to die there?
We thought we were already the living dead, honestly.
Yeah, that's why they killed it. Innocent people, 75% with no criminal record, sent to a torture prison. And Trump didn't want you to know about it. But here's the thing, we have the receipts. We know exactly how this happened, who made it happen, and why. And by the end of this video, you're gonna understand that what happened to this 60-minute story isn't just about one episode. It's about the complete capture of the American media by oligarchs and fascists who will do anything to protect their power. Let me show you how deep this goes. Let me give you some context and start at the beginning, because the context fucking matters. In 2024, Larry Ellison and his son David Ellison, billionaire Zionist hacks who've spent their entire lives using money to buy influence, purchased Paramount. And CBS is part of Paramount. Now, why would a couple of tech billionaires want to own a legacy media company? It's not because they gave a shit about journalism. It's because they want to control the narrative. They want to make sure that when their guy is in power, the media plays nice. And when their guy commits crimes, the media looks the other way. This is oligarchy 101. You don't just buy politicians anymore. That's too obvious, too traceable. You buy the media platforms that shape public opinion. And you buy the gatekeepers who decide what stories get told and which ones get buried. And once the Ellisons took over, they had a problem. CBS News, specifically 60 Minutes, still had journalists who thought their job was to hold power accountable. Journalists who might, I don't know, investigate the Trump administration's use of torture prisons? Journalists who might make their new boss look bad. So they needed someone who would fix that. Someone who would turn CBS into a propaganda outlet while maintaining the aesthetic of journalism. Someone who would kill stories that made Trump look bad while pretending it was all about editorial standards. But before they could install their fixer, they needed Trump to soften up the target. They needed CBS to be scared, compliant, and ready to obey. And that's exactly what Trump did. Here's what you need to understand. This isn't just about CBS. This is about Trump waging a systematic war on every media outlet that dares to tell the truth about him. Since Trump announced he was running for president again, he's been openly threatening news networks. Not just criticizing them, threatening to take away their broadcast licenses, to shut them down, to destroy them if they don't obey. And the media has treated this like it's just Trump being Trump. Like it's just bluster. Like it doesn't matter. But it does matter. Because Trump isn't just talking shit. He's telling you exactly what he's going to do. And when he gets power, he does it. Watch this. This is just a sample of Trump attacking the media. Pay attention to the language that he uses. Pay attention to the threats.
They are a bad group of people. They're sick. I mean, they're sick people. They're sick and evil people. And they want bad things for our country. And they don't report the news. You know, in the old days, when you used public airways free, you had to get a license. I keep saying, if they're reporting fake news, how come they can keep getting a license? Whether it's ABC, whether it's NBC, CBS, or of course CNN, which is, I mean, it's one of the great jokes of all time, CNN. Or MSDNC. But when you're using the public airwaves, aren't you supposed to get a license? So I ask my people that. I ask a couple of guys, and I never really get an answer. I just want to know a simple question. Do you have to report the truth when you're using free airways and make it a fortune with commercials and everything else? And I never get the right answer. And how corrupt the press is. And last night, it was amazing. NBC and CNN refused to air my victory speech because they are crooked, they're dishonest, and frankly, they should have their licenses or whatever they have taken away.
I think ABC took a big hit last night. I mean, to be honest, they're a news organization. They have to be licensed to do it. They ought to take away their license for the way they did that.
But think of this. So CBS gets a license, and the license is based on honesty. I think they have to take their license away. I do.
60 Minutes is a major part of the news organization of CBS, which has just created the greatest fraud in broadcast history. CBS should lose its license and it should be bid out to the highest bidder, as should all other broadcast licenses, because they are just as corrupt as CBS and maybe even worse. Almost every week, 60 Minutes, which is being sued for billions of dollars for the fraud they committed in the 2024 presidential election with their interview of failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris, mentions the name Trump in a derogatory and defamatory way, but this weekend's broadcast tops them all. They did not one, but two major stories on Trump. One having to do with Ukraine, which I say is a war that never would have happened if the 2020 election had not been rigged. In other words, if I were the president. And the other story was having to do with Greenland, casting our country as led by me, falsely, inaccurately, and fraudulently. I am so honored to be suing 60 Minutes, CBS Fake News, and Paramount over their fraudulent, beyond recognition reporting. They did everything possible to illegally elect Kamala, including completely and corruptly changing major answers to interview questions, but it just didn't work for them. They are not a news show, but a dishonest political operative simply disguised as news, and must be responsible for what they have done and are doing. They should lose their license. Hopefully, the FCC, as headed by its highly respected chairman, Brendan Carr, will impose the maximum fines and punishment, which is substantial, for their unlawful and illegal behavior. CBS is out of control, at levels never seen before, and they should pay a big price for this. Networks aren't allowed to be political pawns for the Democrat Party. It has become so outrageous that, in my opinion, their licenses could and should be revoked. Why is it that ABC and NBC Fake News, two of the absolute worst and most biased networks anywhere in the world, aren't paying millions of dollars a year in license fees? They should lose their licenses for their unfair coverage of Republicans and or conservatives, but at a minimum, they should pay up big for having the privilege of using the most valuable airwaves anywhere, anytime. Crooked journalism should not be rewarded, it should be terminated.
Would you weigh in on other late-night hosts that you have
Well, you know, when a late-night host is on network television, there is a licensing. I'll give you an example. I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I get 97% negative. If they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It would be up to Brendan Carr. That's something that should be talked about for licensing, too. When you have a network evening shows, and all they do is hit Trump. That's all they do. If you go back, I guess they haven't had a conservative on in years or something, somebody said. But when you go back and take a look, all they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do.
And then another post, Christmas Eve 2025. If network newscasts and their late night shows are almost 100% negative to President Donald Trump, MAGA, and the Republican Party, shouldn't their very valuable broadcast licenses be terminated? I say yes.
Broadcasters. We heard a little bit about what they're going to do different on 60 Minutes. Is there anything beyond that that you could tell us about what they're going to do differently, fact-based? That's kind of a cultural shock to them. It's going to be.
Yeah, it might be news to some folks over there. One of the things they're going to have to do is put an ombudsman in place for 2 years. So basically a bias monitor that will report directly to the president. So that's something that's significant that we're going to see happening.
So you see what he's doing there. He's not just complaining that the media is mean to him. He's threatening to take away their licenses. He's threatening to shut them down. He's calling them the enemy of the people. Let me spell this out for you, because apparently some people still don't get it. When a president says the press is the enemy of the people, that's not hyperbole. That's not a metaphor. That's a threat. Enemy of the people is what authoritarian regimes call journalists before they arrest them, torture them, or kill them. That's what Stalin called dissidents. That's what Mao called critics. That's what every fascist dictator in history has called the free press before destroying it. And Trump is saying it openly, repeatedly, with no shame and no consequences. This is Authoritarian Playbook 101. Step 1, delegitimize the press. Attack them constantly. Make your followers distrust anything that doesn't come from you. Call them liars, traitors, enemies. Step 2, threaten them with legal consequences. Sue them. Threaten to take away their licenses. Make it too expensive, too dangerous, and too risky to tell the truth. Step 3, buy them. Get your billionaire buddies to purchase media companies and install loyalists who will kill stories you don't like. And step 4, normalize it. Make it seem like this is just how things work now. Make people accept that the press should be nice to the president, that criticism is biased, that holding power accountable is somehow unfair. Trump has done all 4 steps, and it's working, because news networks are terrified of Trump. They're terrified of getting sued. They're terrified of losing their licenses. They're terrified of being targeted by his mob of psychotic followers who will threaten to kill you and your family because you reported a fact that they don't like. So what do the networks do? They self-censor. They soften their coverage. They both sides everything, even when there's no both sides, when one side is telling the truth and the other side is lying. They bend over backwards to prove they're not biased, even when Trump is openly committing crimes. They hire right-wing pundits to balance their coverage. They let Trump officials lie on air without pushback because they're scared of being called partisan. And when that's not enough, when the story is so damning that no amount of both sidesing can save it, they just kill it entirely. That's what happened with the CCOT story. But before we get there, we need to talk about how CBS became the first major network to fully surrender to Trump. CBS was one of the first major networks to completely cave to Trump's pressure. And they didn't just cave, they bent the knee so hard, they kissed the fucking floor. Here's what happened. In late 2024, Trump sued CBS and 60 Minutes over their Kamala Harris interview. They aired a response from Harris where she talked about policy, and Trump claimed it was deceptive editing. It wasn't. The claim was complete garbage. Look here.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
So CBS did what every news organization does. They edited a long interview down to fit the time slot. But Trump sued anyway for $20 billion. Because the lawsuit wasn't about winning, it was about intimidation. Trump wasn't trying to prove CBS did something wrong, he was trying to send a message. Cross me and I'll make your life hell. I'll sue you. I'll threaten your broadcast license. It'll cost you millions in legal fees. I'll sick my mob on you. And when I'm back in power, I'll remember who was loyal and who wasn't. And it worked. CBS could have fought the lawsuit. They should have fought it. It was frivolous. It was meritless. Any judge with half a brain would have thrown it out. But CBS didn't fight. They settled for $16 million. $16 million to make Trump go away. Now, why would CBS pay $16 million to settle a bullshit lawsuit they could have won? Because they weren't just paying to settle the lawsuit. They were paying Trump to leave them alone and signaling to him, we get it, we understand, we'll play ball, just don't come after us. And Trump took the money and kept threatening them anyway. Because of course he did. Because when you show a fascist that you're weak, they don't leave you alone, they push harder. Now, fast forward to December 2024. The Ellisons have bought CBS. Barry Weiss has been installed as the fixer. And 60 Minutes has a story ready to air about Trump sending innocent people to a torture prison in El Salvador. And then Trump goes to a rally in North Carolina and says this 2 days before the segment is supposed to air.
They don't scream, but NBC's really bad. And CBS, I mean, I love the new owners of CBS. Something happens to them, though. 60 Minutes has treated me worse under the new ownership than... They just keep treating me. They just keep hitting me. It's crazy.
Let's break down what he's actually saying there, because Trump speaks in mob code, and a lot of people don't catch it. I love the new owners of CBS. Translation? The Ellisons bought CBS to protect me. We have a deal. They're my guys. Something happens to them though. But there's a problem. Something's not working the way it's supposed to. 60 Minutes has treated me worse under the new ownership than they did before. I thought we had an understanding. I thought you were going to kill stories that made me look bad. Why are your journalists still doing their jobs? They just keep hitting me. It's crazy. Make it stop. I'm the president. The media shouldn't be allowed to criticize me. Fix this or there will be consequences. This isn't subtle. Trump is publicly pressuring CBS to kill stories he doesn't like, and he's doing it out in the open because he knows there won't be consequences. And guess what happens 2 days after this rally? CBS killed the Seacott story. You think that's a coincidence? You think Barry Weiss just happened to decide on her own 2 days after Trump complained at a rally that this story wasn't ready to air? Fuck no. This was a direct response to Trump's threat. He complained publicly and CBS obeyed. That's how this works now. Trump doesn't need to call Barry Weiss directly. He doesn't need to send his lawyers. He just has to go to a rally and say, I'm not happy with your coverage, and the network falls in line. This is how authoritarian regimes control the media. They don't need to pass a law banning criticism. They don't need to arrest journalists. They just make it too expensive, too dangerous, and too risky for media companies to tell the truth. And CBS just proved that it works. So now that CBS had proven that they were willing to obey, the Ellisons needed someone to enforce Trump's will from the inside. Someone who would kill stories that made Trump look bad. Someone who would turn 60 Minutes into a propaganda outlet while maintaining the appearance of journalism. They needed Bari Weiss. So who the fuck is Bari Weiss? And why was she the perfect person to destroy CBS News? Bari Weiss is a former New York Times opinion editor who spent years concern trolling about cancel culture and wokeness while platforming far-right extremists. She positioned herself as this brave truth teller who was willing to stand up to the left-wing mob. But here's the thing about Bari Weiss. She's not brave. She's a coward and a hack. She left the New York Times in 2020 after claiming she was bullied by her colleagues for her views. And then she started the Free Press, a Substack operation that she branded as fearless, independent journalism. Spoiler alert, it's neither fearless nor independent. It's a vanity project funded by right-wing billionaires to launder far-right talking points as brave contrarian truth-telling. Let me tell you what the Free Press has published. Articles defending anti-trans legislation. Articles attacking DEI programs and affirmative action. Articles downplaying January 6th and framing it as a protest that got out of hand. Articles framing Trump as a victim of political persecution. This is the worldview of the Free Press. The real victims in America are conservatives. The real threat isn't fascism or authoritarianism, it's wokeness. The real problem isn't Trump trying to overthrow democracy. It's that some college students don't want Ben Shapiro speaking on their campus. It's fucking pathetic. And it's exactly why the Ellisons wanted her. Because Bari Weiss isn't a journalist. She's a propagandist. And she's very good at disguising propaganda as journalism. She's good at killing stories while pretending it's about editorial standards. She's good at protecting power while claiming to speak truth to it. And she's very, very loyal to her billionaire benefactors. Here's the part that should make your blood boil. When the Ellisons installed Bari Weiss at CBS, they paid her $150 million for the Free Press. Let me repeat that. $150 million for a Substack that gets maybe 6,000 views per article on a good day. You think that was about the content? You think the Free Press is worth $150 million? Absolutely not. That was a payoff. You don't pay someone $150 million for a Substack with no audience unless you're paying them to do something else. And what the Ellisons were paying Bari Weiss to do was turn CBS into state media. And that's exactly what she's been doing since she took over. Since Bari Weiss became the head of CBS News, every single project she's launched has been a complete disaster. And I don't mean disaster in terms of quality, though they're all garbage. I mean disaster in terms of ratings. Nobody watches this shit. She had Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton do a segment together where they talked about bipartisanship and working across the aisle. You know, the kind of meaningless establishment bullshit that makes you want to gouge your eyes out. Nobody watched it. Nobody cared. It was boring, toothless garbage designed to make both sides feel good without saying anything that might upset anyone. Then she had Dana Loesch, the NRA spokeswoman, who once said that guns are the most American thing there is, debate Alan Dershowitz on the Second Amendment. Within the first 6 hours, only 800 people watched. 800. Then she did a town hall with Erica Kirk, the late wife grifter of Charlie Kirk, another grifter pushing every horrible ideology you can think of onto our youth, where Bari threw Erica softballs and let her lecture Americans about how they're not patriotic enough because they don't worship Trump hard enough. The ratings were dog shit, absolutely abysmal. Nobody outside of the MAGA cult gave a fuck. Every single one of these projects flopped. Every single one. And yet Bari Weiss keeps pushing these stories onto America. She keeps flexing her power and control over what CBS airs. Why? Because the point wasn't ratings. The point was control. The Ellisons didn't buy CBS to make money. They bought it to control the narrative. And they didn't hire Bari Weiss because she's good at journalism. They hired her because she's good at killing journalism. And now we get to the CCOT story. The story that actually mattered. The story that had real investigative reporting, real journalism, and real fucking receipts. The story that exposed the Trump regime for the brutal, lawless, authoritarian nightmare that it is. And Bari Weiss killed it. Because that's what she was hired to do. So now you understand the context. The Ellisons bought CBS, Trump waged war on the media, and specifically targeted CBS with lawsuits and threats. CBS caved and settled for $16 million. Trump went to a rally and publicly pressured CBS to stop criticizing him, and 2 days later, Bari Weiss killed the CCOT story. This wasn't an editorial decision. This was a political one. Now let me show you exactly how it happened. Let's talk about what happened on the day this story was supposed to air. Sharon Alfonsi, the 60 Minutes correspondent who spent months working on this story, who interviewed survivors, who got the footage, who had the whole thing vetted by CBS lawyers, was on a plane. She thought that the story was airing that night. She thought that her work was about to reach millions of people. And then, 2 hours before the episode was set to air, CBS posted this. The broadcast lineup for tonight's edition of 60 Minutes has been updated. Our report, Inside CCOT, will air in a future broadcast. That's it. No explanation, no apology, just a vague promise that the story would air in a future broadcast. Do you know what future broadcast means in TV news? It means never. It means the story is dead and they're hoping you will forget about it. Sharon Alfonsi found out when she landed. She wasn't consulted. She wasn't warned. She was just told that her story, her work, had been killed. And when she asked for a meeting with Bari Weiss to find out why, Bari Weiss refused to take the call. Here's what Sharon Alfonsi wrote to her colleagues. I learned on Saturday that Bari Weiss spiked our story Inside CCOT, which was supposed to air tonight. We asked for a call to discuss her decision. She did not afford us that courtesy. Let that sink in for a second. The reporter who did the work doesn't even get a phone call. She doesn't get an explanation. She's just told, your story is dead. Deal with it. That's not how journalism works. That's how authoritarian regimes work. You don't question the boss. You don't ask why. You just obey. But Sharon Alfonsi didn't obey. She pushed back. And in her email, she made it clear that this was not an editorial decision. This was a political one. Our story was screened 5 times and cleared by both CBS attorneys and Standards and Practices. It is factually correct. Pulling it now, after every rigorous internal check has been met, is not an editorial decision. It is a political one. She's absolutely right. This story passed every test. The lawyers said it was fine. Standards and Practices said it was fine. The only person who had a real problem with it was Bari Weiss. And the reason Bari Weiss had a problem with it was because Donald Trump didn't want it to air. So what was Bari Weiss's excuse? She sent out a memo to the CBS staff trying to justify killing the story. And it is some of the most transparent, insulting bullshit I've ever read. Here's what she said. I held a 60-minute story because it was not ready. While the story presented powerful testimony of torture at CCOT, it did not advance the ball. The Times and other outlets have previously done similar work. The public knows that Venezuelans have been subjected to horrific treatment at this prison. To run a story on this subject 2 months later, we need to do more. Okay, let's break down this pile of horseshit line by line. It was not ready. Bullshit. The story was cleared by lawyers. It was cleared by standards and practices. It was screened 5 times. Sharon Alfonsi said that it was factually correct. So what does not ready mean? It means Bari Weiss didn't like it. That's it. That's the whole explanation. It did not advance the ball. What the fuck does that even mean? This is corporate speak for, I don't want to run this story, so I'm just going to use vague language to justify killing it. The story didn't advance the ball. It had new interviews. It had new footage. It had survivors on camera talking about being tortured in a prison that the Trump administration sent them to. How is that not advancing the ball? But here's the real tell. Bari Weiss says, the Times and other outlets have previously done similar work. Oh, so because someone else reported on CCOT, 60 Minutes shouldn't? By that logic, 60 Minutes should never report on anything because someone always gets there first. You don't spike a story because another outlet covered the same topic. You spike a story because you don't want people to know what's in it. And then she says this, we need to do more. We need to be able to get the principles on the record and on camera. There it is. That's the real reason. Bari Weiss wanted Trump administration officials on camera before she'd air the story. Aaron Reichlin Melnick reported that Bari Weiss specifically wanted Stephen Miller on camera. Stephen fucking Miller. The white nationalist ghoul who designed the family separation policy. The guy who spent his entire career demonizing immigrants and pushing for more cruelty. She wanted Stephen Miller, the architect of this policy, to have a chance to spin it, to justify it, to turn it into a both sides debate.
We talk about test scores. Well, if you subtract immigration out of test scores, all of a sudden our test scores skyrocket. If you subtract immigration out of healthcare, all of a sudden we don't have nearly the size of the healthcare challenges our country faces. If you subtract immigration out of public safety, all of a sudden we don't have violent crime in so many of our cities. Issue after issue, we talk about these things that they just happen to us. The schools just suddenly fail. Violent crime just suddenly explodes. The deficit just suddenly skyrockets. These are a result of social policy choices that we made through immigration. And I just wish we lived in a country where the media gave 1/10 a damn as much about Americans who were murdered and brutalized and savagely killed, beaten to death, as they did about whether illegal aliens that we all agree are illegal aliens should get 1 million days in court and 1 million trials and 1 million this and 1 million that. There's 15 million illegal aliens that violently enter the country. If every one of them got the trial that you're asking for, it would take us centuries to remove them. Centuries. We'd be talking about this in 300-400 years. Their great-great-great-grandchildren would be the ones representing them in court. That's how long it would take. Illegal aliens who come to our country have to be removed, and they have to be removed quickly, and that is an essential component of having something that we like to call a country.
That's who Bari Weiss wanted to platform. Because in her world, journalism isn't about exposing the truth. It's about giving both sides equal time, when one side is lying and the other side is telling the truth. But here's the thing. Sharon Alfonsi and her team did ask for comment from the Trump administration. They asked the FBI. They asked the DOJ. They asked Stephen Miller. They asked the White House. And you know what response they got? Nothing. The Trump administration refused to comment. And that's when Bari Weiss decided to kill the story. This is the part that should terrify you. Because what Bari Weiss just did is hand the government a kill switch for any story they don't like. Sharon Alfonsi said it herself in her email. Government silence is a statement, not a veto. Their refusal to be interviewed is a tactical maneuver designed to kill the story. If the administration's refusal to participate becomes a valid reason to spike a story, we've effectively handed them a kill switch for any reporting they find inconvenient. That's exactly what this is. If the Trump administration can kill any story by simply refusing to comment, then they control what gets reported. They decide what the public knows and what they don't. You want to expose war crimes? Refuse to comment. Story killed. You want to expose corruption? Refuse to comment. Story killed. You want to expose concentration camps? Refuse to comment. Story killed. That is state media. And CBS just proved to all of us that's exactly what they have become. So now let's talk about what they were trying to bury. Because this isn't some abstract debate about editorial standards. This is about real people who were tortured on Donald Trump's orders. In March 2024, the Trump administration deported 238 men to CCOT, a maximum security prison in El Salvador that's been called one of the most brutal facilities in the world. They told these people that they were being sent back to Venezuela. They lied. Instead, they shackled them, paraded them in front of cameras like trophies, and delivered them to a prison where they were tortured, raped, and brutalized for months. Here's what we know from the 81-page report the Human Rights Watch released in November. 50% of the people sent to CCOT had no criminal record. None. They weren't gang members, they weren't drug dealers, they weren't criminals. They were just people that Trump wanted gone. 22% had minor offenses, which could even be the immigration they were being deported for. And only 3% had been convicted of a violent or potentially violent crime. The fact that the other 97% have unclear records means the Trump administration didn't even bother to check before they sent them to hell. These people were tortured. They were forced to stay on their knees all night as a form of punishment. They were kept in freezing cells with no blankets. They were sleep deprived. They were beaten. They endured sexual mistreatment. Some CCOT prisoners cut their hands and wrote desperate messages in blood on their bedsheets, hoping someone would see them and help. How many people were abused because the Trump administration didn't bother to check if they were actually criminals? And even if they were, here's the worst part. The Trump administration knew what CCOT was. They knew it was a torture prison. They knew that people were being brutalized there. And they sent innocent people there anyway. Because cruelty is the point. Because Trump and Stephen Miller wanted to terrorize immigrants. They wanted to send a message. Come to America and we will send you to hell. And CBS had this story. They had the interviews, they had the footage, they had the survivors on camera talking about what happened to them. And Barry Weiss killed it because Trump didn't want it to air. But here's where it gets absolutely fucking beautiful. Because Barry Weiss and CBS thought that they killed this story. They thought they buried it. They thought Americans would never see it. They forgot one thing. Canada exists. See, here's what happened. CBS ships 60 Minutes to international partners on Friday night before the episode airs in the US on Sunday. That's standard practice. The episode goes out to networks around the world so that they could broadcast it in their markets. And one of those partners is Global Television Network in Canada. So on Friday night, before Barry Weiss killed the story, the full episode, including the CCOT segment, was already shipped to Canada. It was done. It was out there. And when 60 Minutes didn't air it in the US on Sunday night, guess what happened on Monday? Global TV in Canada put the full episode on their streaming app, including the CCOT story. For at least 2 hours, Canadians, and anyone with a VPN, could watch the story that CBS tried to bury, the full 13-minute segment. Interviews with survivors, footage from inside CCOT, the whole fucking thing. And people screen recorded it, they downloaded it, and they uploaded it to Twitter, Reddit, TikTok, YouTube, and now it's everywhere. Millions of people have seen it, and CBS can't do a goddamn thing about it. This is Paramount's utter incompetence on display. They censored the story in America, but they forgot to censor it everywhere else. And now the whole world knows what they tried to hide. Think about what just happened here. We, Americans, had to rely on another country to see reporting that was done in America about what our administration is doing to people deported from America. A Canadian network aired a story that an American network refused to air about American policy, about American crimes. Does that feel authoritarian enough for you yet? Because that's exactly what happens in authoritarian countries. The domestic press is so captured, so controlled, and so terrified of the regime that foreign outlets have to do the reporting. In Russia, if you want to know what Putin is really doing, you don't watch Russian state TV. You watch the BBC. You watch other outlets that aren't controlled by the Kremlin. In China, if you want to know what's happening, you don't watch CCTV, you watch Al Jazeera. You watch independent media that isn't censored by the CCP. And now, in America, if you want to know what Trump is doing with torture prisons, you don't watch CBS. You watch Canadian TV. That's where we are. That's what American media has become. We're living in a country where the free press is so compromised, so captured by billionaires and fascists, that we have to rely on foreign networks to tell us the truth about our own government. And if that doesn't scare the shit out of you, you're not paying attention. This is why they're so desperate to control the media. Because when the truth gets out, it destroys them. When people see what they're actually doing, when they see innocent people being tortured, when they see the cruelty and the lies, they turn against the regime. That's why Trump sued CBS. That's why the Ellisons bought Paramount. That's why they installed Barry Weiss. Because they know that if the truth gets out, they're fucked. This is a scandal, and it should end Barry Weiss's career. But this time, the corruption goes all the way to the top. The owners of CBS don't want this story to air. They don't give a shit about journalism. They care about protecting Trump. So what do we do about this? People are already calling for the boycott of CBS and Paramount. Adam Kinzinger, a Republican congressman who actually has a spine, announced that he's canceling his Paramount Plus subscription.
This is insane, and this is CBS News / Paramount / 60 Minutes. Personally, I canceled my Paramount subscription today. These are also the same folks that paid millions of dollars to Donald Trump so they could get this merger to happen. But Barry Weiss, now the head of CBS News, clearly a right-winger, clearly in line with Donald Trump, has made it clear that 60 Minutes will do the administration's bidding now. This is absolutely the opposite of free press, which is ironic since she started an organization called The Free Press.
People are organizing on social media to boycott CBS entirely. Don't watch their shows. Don't stream on Paramount Plus. Don't give them your money. And you know what? They should. If CBS is going to be state media, they don't deserve your viewership. Hit them where it hurts. Cancel your subscriptions. Stop watching their network. Make them pay for killing journalism. But a boycott isn't enough. We need more. Here's what needs to happen. 1. Barry Weiss needs to resign. She's turned CBS into Trump's PR firm, and she has no business running a news organization. She should be ashamed. But she won't be because she doesn't have shame. We need to make it so toxic for her to stay that she has no choice but to leave. 2. CBS needs to air the full story, unedited, uncensored, in primetime. And they need to explain why they killed it in the first place. They owe the public an apology. They owe Sharon Alfonsi an apology. And they owe the survivors of CCOT the truth. 3. Congress needs to investigate what happened at CCOT. These people were tortured on American orders. That's a war crime. That's a violation of international law, and someone needs to answer for it. Stephen Miller needs to be subpoenaed. Trump needs to be held accountable. And 4, every journalist at CBS needs to ask themselves if they're okay working for a network that lets the White House kill stories it doesn't like. Because if you stay at CBS after this, you're not a journalist. You're a propagandist. You're complicit. And when the history books are written, your name will be on the wrong side. Let me be very clear about what just happened here. CBS didn't just kill a story. They handed Donald Trump control over what the American people are allowed to know. If the regime doesn't like a story, all they have to do is refuse to comment and CBS will spike it. That's not a free press. That's state-controlled media. That's what happens in authoritarian countries. That's what happens in Russia, in China, in North Korea. And now it's happening here. This is how democracy dies. Not with jackboots and tanks, not with a dramatic coup, but with the quiet little decisions made by cowards in boardrooms who care more about protecting their billionaire owners than telling the truth. This is oligarchy and fascism. This is the capture of American media by the same people who are capturing our government, our courts, our economy. And if we don't fight back, it's only going to get worse. If you're still watching CBS after this, if you're still giving them your money, your time, your attention, you're funding your own propaganda. But here's the good news. The story got out anyway. The footage leaked. The survivors are being heard. And no matter how hard Trump and Barry Weiss try to bury the truth, it keeps clawing its way back to the surface. That's what decentralized media is for. That's why independent channels like this one matter, because the mainstream media has been bought, corrupted, and gutted by oligarchs who answer to power instead of the people. They don't work for you. They work for billionaires. They work for Trump. They work for the people who want to keep you ignorant, compliant, and powerless. But I don't. I work for you. I answer to you. And as long as you keep watching, I'll keep calling out the corruption, the lies, and the authoritarianism that's destroying this country. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications. I've got more videos coming up on holding this fascist authoritarian regime's feet to the fire, and I'm here to tell it like it is. And I'll see you next time.